every person now is affected by bird flu because there are no eggs to buy. And egg prices are so high. So it's beyond just like general inflation. We have an egg crisis because of bird flu. And you have a president who's talking about wanting to reduce the price of eggs. Well, how do you reduce the price of eggs? I hope it's not by reducing our safety parameters to keep unhealthy food out of our food chain.
That was Jessica Malaty Rivera, an infectious disease epidemiologist and science communicator. And this is Epicenter NYC. We connect our communities to news, information, and each other. I'm your host, Amber Castillo. Bird flu has been making headlines again, and if you've been wondering what's really going on, you're not alone. While the risk to the average person is still low, experts are keeping a close eye on the situation, especially as H5N1 spreads in mammals like cows, something we haven't seen at this scale before. At the same time, public health communication from the federal government has shifted under the new administration, leaving some experts concerned about transparency and the availability of critical data. So what does this mean for us? Should we be worried about our food supply? How do we separate facts from misinformation? And what simple steps can we take to stay informed and prepared? Today, I sit down with Jessica Malaty Rivera, an infectious disease epidemiologist and science communicator. Jessica has spent years making complex public health information easier to understand. And today, she's here to help us make sense of what's happening with bird flu, why testing matters, and how small actions like getting a flu shot can make a big difference. Before we jump in, a quick message from our team.
Hi, I'm Mariana from the Epicenter NYC team, and I have an important health question. Have you experienced unexpected brain fog, fatigue, or mood changes? These may be symptoms of long COVID. Most people who have COVID-19 completely recover, but some have lasting symptoms and health problems. If you need more information about what this means, we can help. Long COVID is real. You can stay protected by keeping up to date with your vaccines. Don't let COVID derail your health. Schedule your appointment today. Send us a note at hello@epicenter-nyc.com or call or text us at 917-818-2690.
Now back to the show. Here's my conversation with Jessica.
My name is Jessica Malaty Rivera. I'm an infectious disease epidemiologist and science communicator.
And can you just speak a little bit about what you most focus on?
So my background is in emerging infectious diseases. I've been in this space for about 20 years. What got me into it was actually early indicators of pandemics. I was trying to understand what would the next pandemic be back when I was at Georgetown. Most recently was really involved with the COVID tracking project as the science communication lead, and since then have done a lot of individual work as an independent science communicator and also affiliated with a couple other organizations on helping essentially increase people's science and data literacy, translating complex science into easy to understand messages, and also trying to create resilient communities to understand what's at stake with the evolving information ecosystems that we live in.
Is there anything since recent developments in bird flu outbreaks, and this week the mayor's office had a press statement reminding folks to get their flu vaccine and also just like basic handling practices around poultry and eggs? If you wouldn't mind just saying what you think the most important things folks should know about.
Yeah. As of today, and I feel like people when they hear this are like, okay, but maybe it's not true. But the risk to the average person who doesn't have high touch points or proximity to farm animals, the risk is quite low. That said, we are now dealing with an unprecedented outbreak of bird flu in more mammal species than we've ever experienced, and mammals that have high proximity to humans, like cows. And that is concerning because anytime that happens, the viruses, when they replicate, they make mistakes as they replicate, and they call those mutations. And with each mutation, it can adapt in a way that could potentially make it modify to attack the upper respiratory tract. Right now, it is not able to do that. It's why we're so concerned about this ongoing flu outbreak and the fact that it's the worst flu we've seen since swine flu, if not, I think it's actually surpassed swine flu in that sense.
Worse in what sense?
we've never seen an outbreak like this of influenza. This is the worst flu outbreak we've ever seen. But it's the combination of these two things that's what's concerning, because something that we are worried about is called reassortment. And reassortment would be a farmer who has H3N2 or H1N1 regular seasonal flu, is sick, then gets exposed to H5N1 at the same time,
which is the bird flu.
The bird flu. And if he has both of those, if they have both of those viruses, that could, think about it like a deck of cards reshuffling. The virus can kind of mutate into a new version of itself and perhaps then become transmissible from human to human. What it would require for it to be a pandemic is that. And so far, it doesn't have that. And that's why we're watching it very closely. But again, we're watching it with a little bit of a limitation because the CDC is not communicating the way that we would hope that it would be. It's not doing its briefings on H5N1 like it used to. They are 3 papers behind on H5N1 publications from the MMWR. I mean, I think you saw that they lapsed 2 weeks of publications from MMWR. They came back online last week and they reported about the wildfires when all of us were waiting for 3 papers that we knew were in the pipeline about bird flu.
And that started since this new administration.
Exactly. And so if you had asked me 15 years ago what I thought the next pandemic would be, I would have put my money on bird flu because it is so ubiquitous and it is one that we have worried about because of its potential high mortality rate. Now, again, the mortality rate is not what a lot of people are saying it is because we've never actually known the full incidence of cases. Many people who have bird flu probably went undetected, including in this outbreak, which is why it's so concerning. We're not testing enough to know how many people have actually had COVID, especially because a lot of the human cases have been really, really mild, like just conjunctivitis, which is pink eye.
So a lot of these cases, folks might have symptoms that remind them or make them think they might have something else, so aren't going into the testing.
Exactly. And you have to think about, too, who are these people who are the farmers? A lot of them are undocumented who probably have very legitimate low trust in their employers or in the state government or in the federal government to surrender to things like testing. They probably don't understand that this is not a way to, get genetic information about them or any, I can understand why they would be reluctant to do something like that. And we have not done a good enough job to have targeted communications to increase their trust and to increase their participation in trying to mitigate this outbreak. I have a lot of empathy for folks in that context because they have historically been marginalized and abused in that sense, like overworked, underpaid. The only way in which we have any sort of supply chain for food is because of these types of workers.
And current policies might exacerbate the problem in terms of feeling like they might be targeted or their information collected.
Think about it. I mean, I would also have my eyebrows raised if you were hearing about ICE raids and massive deportations while you perhaps are an undocumented worker or have undocumented family members and you're working in a very high stress, high risk job like poultry farming or dairy farming. I wouldn't want to comply. I mean, I get that. I totally get that. Now, that said, when it comes to food supply stuff, it's very unlikely that a contaminated egg is going to be in a grocery store anyway, because federal regulations require that those eggs are washed and sanitized to remove the virus from the outside. Also, when the virus is spreading among the hens, those hens are not really laying eggs. They lose that ability to lay healthy eggs or they massively reduce. And then a lot of times when an outbreak is happening, those hens are culled. They're killed.
Is there any concern that these federal regulations around this might ease or might not be working properly because of who we now have?
It's a very fair question, right? Because we are very concerned the degree to which the executive branch is going to be controlling the ways in which USDA are responding to this and the policies that we have in place, especially because every person now is affected by bird flu because there are no eggs to buy. And egg prices are so high. So it's beyond just general inflation. We have an egg crisis because of bird flu. And you have a president who is talking about wanting to reduce the price of eggs. Well, how do you reduce the price of eggs? I hope it's not by reducing our safety parameters to keep unhealthy food out of our food chain. And I don't want to speculate because we have not seen examples of that. But I do want to emphasize unhealthy birds are not laying eggs and filling that supply chain, right? That said, too, I think experts are still saying you should probably cook your eggs fully.
Eggs over easy, maybe not the best idea right now, or raw eggs.
I mean, off the record, I'm still eating my eggs over medium. But I still I'll have a runny yolk, because heating the virus will kill the virus. And it's not like I'm eating them raw, completely raw. I think there's probably greater risk in contaminated milk, unpasteurized contaminated milk. I would never recommend unpasteurized milk in any context. There is no value at all. Anything about people talking about nutritional value being increased or not reduced because of pasteurization, it's a lie. Pasteurization does not reduce the nutritional value, and it only keeps milk safe. So I would say that folks need to prioritize pasteurization. And then when it comes to other food, animal products like meat and eggs, to cook them thoroughly. That is the recommendation.
Is there anything specific to raw milk that hasn't been pasteurized that makes it a lot more high risk?
The reason why we know that is because cats have gotten very sick and cats have died from drinking unpasteurized milk. And I believe monkeys have too. So we know that there is infectious virus present in unpasteurized milk. That's why we say, for more reasons than bird flu, for reasons like Listeria, E. coli, Salmonella, there are so many pathogens that can be in unpasteurized milk that the benefits of pasteurization so far outweigh the risk of actually, I'd say that a different way. The risks of unpasteurized milk so far outweigh the benefits. And there really aren't any of drinking unpasteurized milk or having unpasteurized milk available to your pets. I mean, H5N1 is proven to be very deadly for cats. And so I think it's a big warning for farm owners who have cats that are domesticated or cats on the farm to never let them drink unpasteurized milk from the source or unpasteurized milk in general. Give them pasteurized milk if that's what you feed them, because it can be very deadly.
And how worried should we be about human-to-human spread, especially when we're considering compounding of flus you were mentioning?
Yeah. Right now, there is no confirmed human-to-human spread. The virus has not adapted in a way. And when I say adapted, we have receptors on our cells that make it so that a virus can attach to it. Think about Lego pieces coming together. And right now, there isn't the type of match in our upper respiratory tract for that to happen. More mutations could make that happen. But right now, that presence does not exist. What we need to do is keep flu low, regular flu. That's why we're telling people we are dealing with an unprecedented outbreak of flu. And it's not too late to get your flu shot. So get your flu shot. If you're sick, stay home. If you're sick and you need to be out, please wear a mask. And please encourage others to wear masks around you, because respiratory viruses are incredibly infectious. We are still in the dead of winter where respiratory viruses spread even more easily. And people are doing a lot of indoor activities because it is cold and rainy and snowy in many parts of America. So while that has not been identified yet, we cannot say for certain that it can't or won't happen.
And during the pandemic, there seemed to be this ever-evolving new variant. Are there any indicators of if the bird flu does mutate in a way that would cause alarm? Is there any research that you know about that, or any indicators of how quickly that would happen if we don't have more folks vaccinating against the flu and doing other things that maybe would keep that risk of mutation low?
It's a great question. I think what it points back to is the fact that we're not testing enough. And this was a refrain that we said many, many times during the COVID-19 pandemic, that we were not testing enough. And when you're not testing, you don't know how many people are sick at a certain time. It's why those papers that we were waiting so patiently for from CDC are so important, because, like I mentioned, one of them was supposed to be about household cats getting COVID. And there were suspicions of who infected who and in what order in a household, because they were trying to understand, okay, well, was it cat to human or human to cat, or was it human to human? Let's hope it's not. Those types of epidemiological, think about contact tracing, essentially, are pieces of a puzzle that we're trying to understand who infected who. So when we hear a story of a child who gets bird flu, our first question is, did that child have contact with an infected animal? That we need to find. That is the piece of information that we need. Even if it's an adult, what was their contact with an animal? Because right now we have no indicators that another human could have spread that disease. But again, we only know that if we're testing. And because we're not testing enough, we're flying a little bit in the dark.
Is there anything else folks can do? Any other practical tips for folks worried about bird flu?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is like what I mentioned to you. Make sure that you get your flu vaccine. If you're sick, stay home. If you are out, please wear a mask. Reduce your risk of flu will reduce the spread of flu in general and also reduce the opportunities that bird flu has to enter our population. We want to keep this within the animals, and we also want to prioritize protecting the animals because the animals deserve to not be sick, and our food chain supplies depend on it as well.
How should we balance this kind of need to or desire for more folks to be tested if they do have symptoms versus just staying home?
I try to encourage folks to test at home when they are sick. There are tests available that can test you for COVID and for flu. I stock up on those. They are not cheap. And so I very much recognize, and I have to say that that is an accessibility issue. I have heard rumors that covidtests.gov is going to go dark pretty soon. So sponsored, subsidized testing is probably not going to be around for much longer. And that is a huge accessibility issue for folks who may find that cost prohibitive to spend the money on this type of testing. But for folks who have access to it and folks who have access to healthcare, I would say testing is a good idea to understand what people are sick with. And when they know that information, to act on that information.
Got it. And lastly, how do we avoid misinformation around bird flu?
It's tough because I have always said, even when I've disagreed with the CDC, that the CDC is the premier public health agency in the world. And the CDC still has a banner on it, on the website, that says that it's being modified to comply with Trump's executive orders. That makes me super weary about the reliability of information that we are getting from some sources. That said, relying on your state public health department is probably a very good idea. Speaking to your provider about what's going on in your community related to respiratory illnesses is a good idea. And following science communicators like myself and many others on various platforms who are trying to share in real time as much information as we have access to about the ongoing situation, the emerging data, and how to proceed with it is probably the best we can do, at least for now.
And how can folks find you?
Yeah, I am sharing all types of science information on Instagram, Blue Sky, and now on Substack. People can find me through my name, Jessica Malaty Rivera, on all those platforms.
While the risk to the general public remains low, experts like Jessica Malaty Rivera remind us that proactive measures like getting a flu shot, testing, and staying up to date with reliable information can make a big difference in preventing the spread of infectious diseases. If you want to keep up with Jessica's work and get clear, science-based updates on public health, you can follow her on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Substack, all linked in our show notes. And if you found this episode helpful, share it with a friend and leave us a review. That's all for today. Thanks for listening, and thanks for supporting us as we do our best to support our community. We couldn't do it without you. For more stories like this, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at epicenter-nyc.com. Our intro music is All the Pretty Horses by Caravika. You can find more of their music on their website, linked to in our podcast description.